In ancient times, there was a king who had a beloved goose. The goose is beautiful, and the red wine that the king feeds it is very expensive. The king did not like when others touched his goose casually, nor did he like it when others teased his goose. In his heart, the goose's status far exceeded even that of his wife and son. The king felt that he was getting older and that there were not many days left. He chose his son as his heir. From then on, he began to train his son, teaching his son how to be a good king. One day, the king finished slipping the goose and fed it expensive red wine. Then left the goose in the yard and returned to the palace himself. When the king did these things, his son was always watching. Not long after, a large bird flew from a distance, and the big bird landed on the head of the goose and began to peck at the head of the goose. The king's son quickly ran into the palace, picked up his father's shotgun, and returned to the courtyard to shoot the big bird. But his marksmanship was rusty, and instead of hitting the big bird, he hit the king's most beloved goose. The king's son was so frightened that his whole body began to tremble. The king's servant saw all this behind him and said to him, "I have seen all this, I have seen it clearly. If my father knew about this, he would have killed me. I beg you not to tell him the truth." The king's son said. The servant then blackmailed the king's son, saying to him, "If you don't want the king to know that you killed his beloved goose, then you must obey me." In desperation, the king's son had to accept the servant's conditions. The servants began to use this to torture him. The king noticed that his son was becoming more and more restless, and he looked restless every day. He couldn't help but ask his son what made him so uneasy, but the son shook his head and said nothing. Many days passed like this, and the king's son became increasingly intolerant of threats from his servants. So, he decided to tell the king the truth of the matter. To his surprise, his father did not get angry, but chose to forgive him. This made him very grateful to his father. At this time, the servant did not know that the king's son had told the king everything, and still planned to use the incident to continue to intimidate and torture the king's son to make him obey his words. But the king's son told him that he had confessed the matter to the king, and the king was not angry, and he no longer had to fear that the king would know about it, and would never again be at the mercy of his servants. After the blackmail was exposed, the servant left in shame. Since then, the king's son has been freed again, and he has learned that lying can make a man a slave.